Adaptation was taught to me at a young age. To avoid a beating, I did as expected. If the beating was inevitable, then I needed to escape or do everything in my power to avoid it. At 6 years old, traveling alone on a country bus from Kingston to St. Anne, I learned quickly how to adjust. When I was given an uncomfortable seat for the 3 hour trip, I knew to keep quiet and bear it or risk upsetting the conductor. I learned to read a room very early in life. That meant studying my surroundings and learning how to code switch in order to survive. Raytown in the early 1990s had a rich and vibrant culture. It also had its own misgivings. Alongside political tension, there was deep mistrust of the police who were supposed to protect us. Many believed the police worked with gangs, so reporting crimes felt pointless. There remained a fading generation that upheld a sense of community ethics, but many had migrated at that time. Those who stayed were outnumbered by a younger generation that took no chat from anyone, especially law enforcement. In that environment, many people in the inner city suffered in silence, believing justice was not something they could access. In Jamaica at the time, especially in inner city communities, sexual abuse and assault were rarely reported. Silence was shaped by fear of retaliation, fear of public shame, and fear of not being believed. Victims often carry their experiences alone, knowing that speaking out could expose them to ridicule or even danger rather than protection. Navigating Raytown meant you had to see and blind, hear and be deaf. The community was made up of many personalities, which is what made it vibrant, but also what hid its dark corners. From time to time, whispers would spread about a girl who had a train ran on her, where groups of corner boys sexually assaulted her. Instead of outrage, there was often blame. People would say, "She love road too much, man," or "She mixed with too much of the boy them." Nothing was off limits in how people spoke. In a community where arguments could weaponize your deepest pain, many victims chose silence as protection. Speaking out meant risking that your trauma will be thrown back at you in the middle of a cursing match. Even within families, disclosure was not safe. Overcrowded living conditions, multiple people sharing one room, creating an environment where abuse could occur and remain hidden. And if you told someone, the first question that was often asked would be, "What did you do?" And even if someone believed you, there were few options to remove you from the situation. So at almost 13 years old, I thought about telling my mother about the overseer, but I convinced myself that telling her could leave us homeless, as we had been before. I could not bear that possibility. Avoiding him seems like my only option, but I had no plan B if plan A failed. Standing there naked, water running over me, my arms crossed over my chest to hide my developing breasts. I felt bile rise in my throat as he stepped into the concrete shower. I felt a sharp pinch on my womanhood. "Stop! No! We are doing here," I cried. He laughed, thick lips stretched into a smile that never reached his bloodshot eyes. The smell of alcohol and marijuana made me nauseous. I lost control of my bladder. Immediately, pee gushed down my legs, and my eyes filled with tears. "Me not tell you say me want a favor, man. A this me want, he said, slowly, ending with a cackle. I wanted to scream. My mind screamed no as his rough hands tried to force my arm away from my chest. I grabbed my rag and swatted him away. "Oh, what you do?" he asked, still smiling, but there was something dead in his eyes now. In my head, I began to pray, please deliver me, O Lord. As the prayer moved from my head to my heart, I heard my name. Anne! For a moment, I thought it was an angel calling me, like my name had been read from someone's heavenly scroll. Anne, you there? The overseer froze, turned towards the voice, then turned back to me. He said, shut your mouth, he said quietly. No smile this time, and he meant it. He jumped over the veranda and disappeared into his house. The water still ran over me, tears mixed with it as I stood there shaking. I made a silent promise. I would never bathe again when no one was at home. Anne! The voice called again. Yes? Me there in the bathroom, me a come, wait. I shouted quickly, afraid the voice would leave and he would return. I recognized the voice. It was my next door neighbor. By then, a thin line of blood was running down my leg into the drain. That was my period, my monthly menses. You want me come back? She called. No, I shouted, too fast, too urgent. I washed her quickly, dried off, and dressed. And when I opened the grill to let her in, she saw that my eyes were red. She asked, you all right? I paused thoughtfully. No, I said, my voice breaking. Tears rolled down my face and her expression shifted instantly to concern. Inside, my mind was blank. All I knew was that I needed to get out and not go back. She followed me into the room my mother and I shared. Me see you come home early from school and I wonder what happened. My period come and me in a pain, so them send me home, I said quietly. As soon as the word left my mouth, the grill gate slammed loudly. We both turned towards the window. It was him, standing at the gate watching us, angry. I looked away, and she quickly shut the window slats. Me not like that ugly old man there, you know. I said nothing, but I firmly agreed. She turned back to me and she said, ma have painkiller over me yard, you want one? No, no go over there, stay with me, I said quickly. She studied me. Then she said, you sure you're all right? Me just not feel good, I said. That seems to satisfy her, but I was still processing everything. What would happen if I told her? What would people say? Would we have to move? Would it be his word against mine? I felt dirty, like I wanted my skin to fall off and grow back. Eventually, she convinced me to come over to her yard, and I agreed immediately. Any place felt safer than staying right there. As we walked past him at the corner, I pretended not to see the overseer, but I could still feel his eyes on me and hear the threat. Shut your mouth. I didn't tell my mother. Instead, I asked if I could stay at my friend's house in the evenings when she wasn't home. My mother agreed with conditions. Chores done, homework completed. That became my survival plan. Come home late so others were present, lock myself in the room if I think I was alone, bolt the bathroom door if I'm taking a shower, avoid this ugly old man at all costs. Stay on the road at my friend's yard if he was near. Adaptation, survival. My friend's yard became my only refuge. Her mother and father were kind. Their rooms were slightly bigger than ours, but more people live in their yard. It was a tenement yard. Still, everything was always clean in their room. Someone was always sweeping, washing, or putting something in order. There were many children there too, and they often sat along a short cement wall where we could sit and see the road. From there, I could watch my own gate, see who came and went, and importantly, see when my mother returned home. Safety, for me, became about visibility, about witnesses, about never being alone. But survival came at a cost. I started coming home late from school almost every day. I wasn't sleeping properly anymore. At nights, I would lie beside my mother, eyes wide open, listening, waiting, replaying. At school, I was exhausted. Some days I fell asleep in class, other days I skipped classes entirely. My grades began to slip again. I started to wonder if people could see it, if they could look at me and know what had happened. Were they judging me? Did I do something to deserve this? Then another thought crept in, one that stayed. I wish I had someone to protect me. My friend had both her parents. She and her father were especially close. I watched them together sometimes, quietly, and felt something I didn't quite have the words for, a longing, a wondering. What would it feel like to have someone who wouldn't let anything hurt you? That was when I started thinking more about my father. I built up the courage to ask my mother about him, and she said she hadn't heard from him in a long while, but had his last known address. She encouraged me to write him, but I hesitated. What if he didn't respond to my letter? What if he didn't want me? By third form, I was unraveling. I skipped classes to climb mango trees and got caught. I talked back to my math teacher when she pushed me too far. I was tired, irritated, and carrying something I didn't understand how to release. One day, I brought a romance novel to school and hid it under my desk, trying to escape into a different world during class. Miss Morris, the math teacher, saw me. She said, "Bring whatever you have under the desk." I looked at her and something shifted. For a moment, she wasn't just my math teacher. In my mind, she became the overseer. Him, the same authority, the same power, the same feeling of being cornered. All the anger I had swallowed, all the fear I had buried, it rose at once. Before I could stop myself, I said, "Every day you come sit down one place instead of stand up and teach we. You know, give no example, just work out of the book straight. You should have shame for call yourself teacher." Silence. Silence in the classroom. Then consequences. He sent me straight to the dean of discipline. I kissed my teeth and walked out. Anger carried me forward like fuel. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about her, about school, about anything. I just wanted to be left alone. Father Richards, the Dean of Discipline, wasn't in his office, so I sat and waited outside. But behind the office stood several tall mango trees, heavy with ripe fruit. They looked almost unreal, bright, full, inviting. I wandered towards them. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The fear, the anger, the exhaustion. All I could think about was how hungry I was. Students weren't allowed to pick the mangoes, but if they fell, we could take them. The rule didn't stop anyone, though. Girls climbed the mango tree when no one was watching, others threw stones. To this day, I don't know what came over me. I took off my tunic and I climbed. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was rebellion. Maybe it was just the need to feel free even for a moment. Other girls gathered below the tree, cheering me on. I began picking mangoes, ripe, green, half ripe, and tossing them down to the girls below. That morning, I was wearing one of my worst pair of leggings, thin and worn, with holes in my socks and holes in my legging, and all that was just a disgrace. Some girls laugh when they notice I ignore them. But once the mangoes start falling, they forgot about my torn leggings and my holy socks. I sat high in that tree, eating, laughing, throwing fruit, free. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking. Just sweetness. Just the juice from the mango running down my throat. Just the sounds of the girls shouting their thanks below. One for me, two for them, one for me, two for them. I tucked a small mango into my waistband and reached for another. Then suddenly, everything went quiet. Too quiet. I looked down and looked into the eyes of Father Richards. Come down now, he said. My heart dropped. Not one girl said a word to me. Not one issued a warning. Not one. They all disappeared when the Dean of Discipline came. Lay left me there alone. The embarrassment burned as I climbed down, half dressed, half exposed, aware of eyes watching from classroom windows nearby. Get dressed and go straight to the school office. Meet me there, he said, turning away. I caught sights of the students peeking through windows, and I cut my eyes at them angrily. I hope the mangoes give them diarrhea, I thought. After that, I was suspended for 2 days. At home, I got a beating. When I returned to school, I was taken out of uniform and made to wear black skirts with the school's white shirt for 2 weeks. A public signal that I'd done something serious and was to be ashamed at school. I sat outside the principal's office during that time, completing assigned work. The principal, Sister Bernadette Little, was strict and intimidating. She reminded me of my mother, but sterner and colder. No one wanted to cross her path, much less sit outside her office. Those 2 weeks felt endless. At home, things shifted too. A woman from my friend's yard told my mother that I was all over the place when she wasn't around. She suggested that I stay inside my yard instead of mixing with other children. Combined with my behavior at school, my mother decided that this was in fact necessary. She didn't know why I was acting out. She didn't know what had happened. She didn't know that whenever the overseer found a moment, he would pinch my breast and I would fight him off and escape. That was when I started writing letters. Not to anyone in particular, just writing about running away, about leaving everything behind. And one day my mother found one of my letters. She looked at me and she said, "I want to run away too." And that stayed with me. After that, I was only allowed at the front gate and nowhere beyond. Now I began learning how to open the grill gate without making a sound. I learned how to stay in the room with all the windows closed, silent, and still. I made sure every window wasn't just closed but shut tight so no one could open them from the outside. If my friends came and called at the gate and I thought I was home alone, I wouldn't answer. When mommy or anyone else was there, the windows would be open to let in fresh air. But if I couldn't avoid it, I would stay on the road and pray no one told my mother that I'd been on the street. One day I came home and my mother had already left to sell peanuts on the street. Competition had gotten really fierce, and some vendors were selling their peanuts cheaper. So mommy had to go out earlier, give more for the same price just to keep up. That meant many days she wasn't home when I returned home from school. I knew she wasn't there because when she was home, she left the two bottom windows at the front slightly open. When she wasn't, she closed them and she hid the keys in the garden. That day they were shut. I approached the grill quietly, praying the overseer wasn't around. Their doors was closed and I let out a small breath of relief. It felt like no one was home. As I opened my room door silently, I suddenly heard a voice. Wait, you come home early, man. Come here to me. My chest tightened. I said, must soon come. And I rushed inside quickly and locked the door. I pressed my back against the door and I stood there for a moment. I made up my mind right then and there. I was not opening that door until my mother came home, even if it meant getting a beating for not washing the plates that was outside. I started to remove my uniform, and as I pulled the tunic over my head, I heard one of the windows creaked open. I froze. I turned slowly, and there he was, the same bloodshot eyes staring straight at me. A thin spliff hung from the side of his mouth as he spoke. You never hear me call you. Me tired. Me just want to stay by myself, I said, hoping he would leave. For a moment, he just looked at me. Then he turned and walked away, but not before slamming the window shut hard. The sound echoed through me. I listened carefully as he left the yard, but relief didn't come. Instead, fear settled deeper. What if he went to drink and came back before anyone else got home? I moved quickly, closing and locking every window tight. The room was already hot, no fan, no air, but I just did not care. At least I felt contained, safer. I took all the rest of my clothes and sat on the bed, trying to think, trying to figure out what to do next. Then, bang, bang, bang! My heart jumped. He was back. He started knocking loudly at the door. I stayed silent. I would not answer. The banging continued harder and louder. I began to pray again. Please, stop. For a moment it went quiet. Then a violent crash. The door shook. Another bang, this time like someone was kicking it in. I froze in shock. What was happening? Who is doing this? It can't be him. Can it? Who that? What ya do? I shouted. No answer, just more kicking. By the fourth blow, one of the inches on the door began to tear loose. Panic surged through me, and I ran to the front windows and flung them open just in time to see my mother coming through the gate. Everything exploded after that. My mother stormed in and saw him kicking down the door. Why you do? She shouted, followed by words that burned hotter than fire. He turned, drunk and raging, looking at her, cussing him out. Me know say she a fuck down the whole of her town and have man in there no misread. My mother stepped forward immediately. She said, my daughter barely 14. Which man she harass fuck? That no give you no right for kick down my door. They squared off. Him, loud, drunk, and aggressive. My mother, small but fierce, backing down from no one. They argued for what felt like hours. When his wife came home, all she said was that he was wrong for kicking the door in. Nothing more. My mother turned to me and asked what happened, and I said, I just wanted to stay in the room by myself, Mommy. She accepted that, but he kept ranting. Mommy decided after a while that she was going to call the police because this was plain wrong. A migraine started to build behind my eyes almost immediately. The police took their time in arriving, and when they did, he was still drunk. And he told them, me I save our orin daughter from breed, and that made me kick off the door. And even the officers looked unimpressed. His story made no sense. They told him he needed to repair the door. Instead, he demanded that both my mother and I leave. The officers then told him that he would have to give proper notice and follow the housing law. He never fixed the door. My mother had to pay for that. The very next day, he wrote a notice and he gave it to her. I blame myself. Why? I couldn't really explain why I blame myself, but I did. But I watched my mother cry. watched her sit there staring into space, and I felt a lot like a lump of nothing. That night, I made a decision. I would write my father. I would ask for help. I would beg him to let me come and live with him in America. Because in my mind, that was the only way out of all of this. That incident brought my mother and me much closer. She wasn't as rigid as before. She told me that if the overseer ever touched me, I should come to her and speak up. In that same breath, she opened up about him. He was trying to touch on her as well. We bonded. It was then that I began to understand the life she had lived. You see, in Jamaica, especially in the early to mid 20th century, it was not uncommon for children to be raised outside of their biological parents' home. This practice, often referred to as child shifting or informal fostering, was rooted in economic hardship, migration, and the structure of Caribbean family life. Mothers, often with limited education and resources, made difficult decisions to place their children with relatives or other household that could offer greater stability. To an outsider, it might look like abandonment, but more often it was sacrifice. An attempt to give a child access to food, schooling, or safety that a parent could not provide alone. These patterns were not isolated, they were generational, shaped by poverty, history, and resilience. My mother was one of those children. She had been fostered by different families because of her own mother's belief she was doing what's best. She could not have known how these situations would have turned out. And so the pattern repeated itself. It became normalized. A survival strategy passed from one generation to the next. My mother left a physically abusive relationship with the father of her children because she believed she had no other choice. With little education and no formal training, she made what she thought was the most practical decision, leaving the children with their father who was working. The same pattern played out again with my siblings in St. Anne. Later, when my sister left her daughter with us, she too believed she had no other option. By the time you reach the end of my story, you will see how deeply this pattern runs. My mother only knew what life had taught her, and despite everything, she tried her best to be a mother to me. But circumstances and a lack of resources stood in the way. At 13 going on 14, I understood all of this. But understanding didn't make it any easier. I felt frustrated that I couldn't fix anything. Instead, I felt like a burden to my mother. I saw the wear and tear of life etched onto my mother's face, the gray hairs, the exhaustion, and I told myself that if I spoke about what was happening to me, it will only make matters worse. What I didn't say out loud was this: my mother had been raped too, by a pastor's son while she was in one of those foster homes. She had already carried so much. At 48, her health was not the best. I felt it was my responsibility to protect her from more stress, from more pain. So I stayed silent. Within a month, the overseer issued at least two more notices for us to leave. Anxiety settled into our daily lives. We just couldn't afford first and last month rent, much less moving costs. Every few days, he would find something new to complain about, turning small issues into full arguments. My mother never wanted to back down, met him head on every time. Our neighbors, they told us that the rightful owner of the room, who lived in America, will soon be visiting. Since we weren't renting directly from them, it would be best for us to leave before they arrived. And so my mother started asking around for places, but everything was just too expensive. We had no money to make the move. And even at school, things continued to fall apart. My grades couldn't get any worse, and Days would pass where I had no lunch for money at all. No lunch money at all. One day, I skipped classes and picked ackee from a tree along the convent grounds. I remember that the food and nutrition lab had flour, rice, and other supplies, so I decided to cook ackee, dumpling, and lemonade. A few friends joined in, and for a moment it felt like something good, something normal. But before we could even start eating, a teacher caught us. We were disciplined again. This was the final straw. The school recommended that I repeat third form, not just as punishment, but as remedial support. According to the principal, Sister Bernadette, none of my grades were above D average. And my report card was covered in red ink. During those days, they will circle the subject that you were failing. I failed almost every subject. My mother looked at it and she asked, "Your alphabet start with D? You don't have no A in your alphabet?" Even then, she didn't beat me. I just think she was tired. She was asked to meet with a guidance counselor to address my behavior and come up with some sort of plan. That was when I was placed on school subsidy. It meant I could come early in the mornings and receive breakfast. I got lunch tickets. If there were extra class in the afternoon, I could get a snack. It helped more than I can explain because I no longer was concentrating on the hunger that I was feeling. No, I had a clear head to take in some of the lessons that I was learning at school. It also took a lot from my mother to accept that help. You see, she was a strong, independent woman that was not raised to beg or to accept charity, but she had to. I had been to the guidance counselor's office before for different reasons. The most recent was when I was pulled from devotion for wearing a black shoes to school. When I explained that my mother couldn't afford another pair, that we shared one pair of shoes and two pairs of slippers between us, the counselor looked at me like I was crazy. She called in my mother. Then my mother cried in that office for what felt like forever. She was broken. That moment opened the door to support secondhand uniform, secondhand books, extra lessons, meals, things we needed but could never afford before. Repeating third form was its own experience. In some ways, it was good for me. In other ways, it was a wake up call and it was a little traumatic. Some girls teased me, called me dunce bat. I had to take it. I hadn't done the work to move forward to a higher grade. At home, my mother tightened her rules. I was to have no friends at my gate, no visiting anymore. I felt trapped, but in a different way. Still, the overseer kept his distance. After the police came, he no longer tried to pinch me. He and my mother continued clashing, but I was no longer allowed anywhere near their house, not even to watch television in their living room. That was fine with me. I didn't want to be near him at all. And though I liked his wife initially, I saw her as pineless. The little girl who they cared for seemed unaffected. She was more excited about her family visiting from America than anything happening around her. By then, I had already sent my letter to my dad. There was no response though, so I turned my focus back to my school. Saturday maths classes, trying in my own way to move forward and just to forget. And then I saw him. I was coming home from Saturday class, heading towards my yard when a tall, slim guy stepped out of the yard in front of mine. He smiled at me, and I smiled back. He wore denim jeans and an oversized Buffalo Bill jersey that seemed way too big for him. But somehow it worked. As I reached my gate, a friend walked up beside me and she said, "You know who that?" I glanced back at him as they walked away, and I said, "No." She leaned in slightly. "I him name's Scrappy." At that time, I didn't understand the significance of the moment, but soon enough, I would. You see, the patterns that shaped my mother had already begun shaping me. And just when I thought I understood how to endure them, something new stepped into my path. Thank you for listening to the sixth chapter in my book, A Journey from Jamaica to Beyond. If you haven't done so already, please remember to like, subscribe, and share, and hit that post notification bell. Again, thank you for listening, and have a great day until I see you in the next one.